Whether or not you agree, the statistics don't lie. Barry Bonds is quite possibly the greatest baseball player who ever lived, and it's not really much of a debate, considering the fact that he hit the most home runs in MLB history, 762. He also has the most MVP awards, 7, in the entire history of Major League Baseball. Arguably speaking, the best pitcher since the Vietnam War ended is Roger Clemens, and quite honestly, he's one of the greatest pitchers who ever lived. If you don't believe me, check out his all-time wins above replacement metric. He's 8th all-time in terms of WAR. When it comes to baseball, WAR! What is it good for? Absolutely everything! And yet 2 of the greatest baseball players of all time are not enshrined in Cooperstown. Why, you might ask? Well, you already know the answer to that question. The answer is 1 word, or 2 words if you want to sound more intelligent. Steroids, aka performance-enhancing drugs. I think what's interesting about all the 3 major American sports is that the sports writers determine Hall of Famers on the normal balance, not the coaches, managers, or players. Technically speaking, the Hockey Hall of Fame is in Toronto, Canada. Not that sports writers aren't qualified. They're very entertaining, they ethically interview the players, and they legally report on the sports they cover. Not one sports writer who's eligible to vote in Hall of Famers has a major problem with libel or slander. Or any problem, for that matter. Still, they're journalists. They usually didn't make it to the big show. So what do they know about the stressful nature pertaining to a Major League Baseball career? Do they truly know how hard it is to hit a curveball on an 0-2 count? My point is that the sports writers are susceptible to biases and errors in judgment due to lack of real-world MLB playing experience, because the Baseball Hall of Fame isn't determined by a complex algorithm or formula. If a player ticks off the right number of writers, they theoretically don't get into the Hall of Fame due to a grudge. Not that the non-steroid users don't have their place in Cooperstown, except for maybe Harold Baines. While Baines finished with over 2,800 hits and played in 6 All-Star games, he's still a mid-ball player when it comes to wins above replacement. Incredibly, Baines is in the Hall of Fame despite being in 576th place in all-time WAR. So why is Baines in the Hall of Fame and not someone like Bonds? Simply speaking, it's all about 1 word: humility. Bonds committed perjury about steroid usage and wasn't generally a well-liked teammate. Bain, on the other hand, was a well-liked teammate who's one of the fan favorites in terms of White Sox fandom. My problem with this logic is Bonds was much better at hitting a baseball, stealing bases, and playing defense than Baines. Then again, playing baseball is a privilege, not a right. Bonds, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, and others broke the rules of that privilege by taking steroids. Steroids were mandated as an illegal substance as early as 1991. Then again, there wasn't a suspension rule when it came to taking steroids. In layman's terms, why should a player be punished for taking anabolic steroids if the league didn't even want to enforce the law? Not that it makes what Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, and Barry Bonds did was right. However, if the league doesn't care about enforcing its own policy, then does it make what those aforementioned steroid users did what was wrong? I think it's a complicated issue, especially considering that home runs drive ratings and ticket sales. Baseball made a killing off the 1998 home run race. The ratings were great, and to be perfectly frank, steroids don't necessarily help you hit a baseball. They can, however, help a person hit a baseball farther. As such, steroids can be construed as cheating, which is why the Baseball Writers of America are reluctant to elect steroid users into Cooperstown. But I'm far from an expert on the subject. Mr. Alan Lanz, who previously worked as a sports psychologist for the New York Mets, as well as players for other teams, said, quote, "Much has been made of steroid rage, or roid rage for short. In baseball, aggressiveness is a very controlled kind of thing. If you don't have control, it becomes detrimental to your performance. Even at the plate, what's required is focus and concentration. You can't use steroids for something like that," unquote. So, according to Lanz, steroids can have more negative consequences than positive ones. Having complete mental control at the plate is sometimes more important than physiological and muscular dominance. As such, it could be interpreted that not taking steroids is better for your mental state during the stressful last innings of a ball game than taking PEDs. But according to Charles Yasalis, steroids can make your hands faster. Yasalis, a former professor of health and development at Penn State University, once said, quote, "Steroids make your hands faster in that they increase muscle in your forearms and pectorals and numerous muscle sets involved in hitting a baseball. If you need less time to get around on the ball, you have more time to tell if it's a slider, knuckleball, or curve. That makes complete sense," unquote. And, according to Dr. Gary Walder, steroids help the ball player jerk the bat around quicker, leading to a basic force equals mass times acceleration equation. Walder, who was a professor at New York University and studied doping for over 20 years, said, quote, "The mass is muscle and the acceleration is the bat speed. There is a collision. The ball is being hit with more force than before and will go farther," unquote. So what can the fans and sports writers interpret here? My interpretation is that while steroids can lead to roid rage and a mental disadvantage, they also give the player a significant physical advantage in less time to get the barrel on the ball and forcing the ball to go farther. However, steroids can lead to the ball player being more susceptible to injury. Starting in the early 2000s, when the steroid era was in its prime, doctors saw an increasing number of elbow injuries, knee injuries, and tendon ruptures, in which the muscle strips completely away from the bone. The muscle mass gets so great that the tendons sometimes can't carry the weight, said Dr. Robert J. Demuth, director of sports medicine at the Cleveland Clinic. That's why most of the ball players refuse to use steroids. While PEDs gave players like Bonds and Sosa significant physical advantages, the chances of injury, sterilization, and increased aggression was too high for players like Frank Thomas, Jim Thomes, and others to want to take the risk. So should the sports writers really hold a grudge against PEDs because there is no empirical data to prove that taking steroids directly correlates to being a better home run hitter? In my humble opinion, the answer is yes and no. After all, PEDs were banned from baseball as early as 1991 and brought mainstream to MLB fans as early as 1971. Still, MLB refused to police the matter until the matter got way out of hand. By 2003 and the subsequent Balco fiasco, it was too little too late. By 2003, Bonds had the new single-season home run record. McGwire had the previous single-season home run record just 3 years before Bonds broke it. The records had been shattered. Baseball had changed. Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine once said, quote, "Chicks dig the long ball," unquote.
Hi, Tom.
Chicks dig the long ball.
Hey, have you guys seen Mark?
You guys seen Mark?
And that absolute statement was very prevalent during the 1998 home run chase. The 1998 ESPN ratings averaged 1.9 million viewers, 21% more than any other season in ESPN history. When Mark McGwire tied Roger Maris for the single-season home run record, the ESPN telecast averaged 10.6 million viewers, which is by far the most viewed regular-season MLB game in ESPN history. Did Bud Selig know that Sosa and McGwire were juicing? Of course, Bud Selig used to be the commissioner of MLB. Hard to say. But even if the commissioner's office knew about steroid usage, you can't ignore that home runs drastically increase ratings. And remember, baseball desperately needed those ratings increased. Just 4 years prior, MLB had a work stoppage and an inevitable cancellation of the 1994 postseason and subsequent World Series. The fans were reluctant to come back to baseball, and they desperately needed something to cheer for, to forget about the anguish of the 1994 strike. Insert the 1998 home run chase. So even if Selig and the commissioner's office knew about the players juicing, would they do everything they could to stop it? Doubtful. Remember, mandatory player testing wasn't put into place until 2003. The players weren't forced to take tests in 1998. Why would a cheer admit to cheating if the home runs lead to more sponsorship deals and more media attention for the player? The best way to know if the players are taking steroids is to mandate random drug testing. That wasn't around in 1998 and 2001. Still, the players are at fault for having an unfair advantage at the plate. That being said, we don't know for sure what pitchers were taking steroids and what hitters were taking PEDs. This simply means that while we know Bonds, Palmeiro, and others are linked to the Balco story, we don't know if a Hall of Famer like Mike Mussina was taking steroids. I'm not accusing Mussina of steroids. I'm just saying that even if Mussina took steroids to quite possibly have an unfair advantage on the mound, why would he admit to doing it? Because he has integrity? If he had integrity, he wouldn't have cheated in the first place. Well, why did they cheat? Well, former Tufts University physicist Roger Tobin might have the answer. According to his research, a 4% increase in ball speed, or exit velocity, can increase home run production anywhere from 50 to 100%. Consequently, his physics research cannot tell the researchers if a particular home run was steroid-assisted, nor can it determine if the home run indicates the use of illicit means. The other problem with the sports writers not voting in the steroid players is most of these players were Hall of Famers prior to the 1998 season. The prime era of the steroid era was probably 1999 to 2002, and if you look at Bond's statistics before 1999, he was a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Not only is he a member of the 40-40 club, 40 homers and 40 stolen bases in a season, He almost was an unheard of two-time member of the prestigious club. He finished just 3 stolen bags shy of the illustrious club during the 1997 season. 1997 was just 3 years prior to when Bonds became the greatest home run hitter of all time. Well, according to the history books, anyway. And now Bonds and Clemens can only get into the Hall of Fame from a special committee. This special committee, which is simply known as the Contemporary Era Players Committee, consists of executives, veteran media members, and people from the National Baseball Hall of Fame. There are 16 members in total, so not only do Clemens and Bonds have to play nice to veteran journalists, they also have to make sure that the board of directors like them. Good news is, the Contemporary Baseball Era Committee usually consists of former managers, people that have been around the players and know exactly how good Bonds and Clemens were prior to the steroid era becoming prevalent in the late 90s and early 2000s. What's really interesting about this whole debate is 3 of the alleged steroid users are in the top 20 according to wins above replacement. Bonds 4th, Clemens 8th, and Alex Rodriguez 16th. And yet the debate continues. Rodriguez gets the nickname A-Royd for obvious reasons, but he's also one of baseball's most well-known broadcasters. He's on the Fox Sports pre- and post-game shows as a guest analyst, which means he's basically an ambassador for Major League Baseball. See how baseball can't seem to get out of its own way? They want Rodriguez to represent their game during the postseason, but they won't let the retired player get his Hall of Fame plaque. To me, that seems very strange. Either Rodriguez is shunned from MLB due to steroid usage, or his statistics count, allowing him to be selected into Cooperstown. Come on now. It's either one or the other. Oh, and Rodriguez used to be a color commentator for ESPN. It doesn't seem like MLB Network, Fox, and ESPN care about his steroid usage. They are more than okay with him representing their broadcast as a credible source of information. So why can't the sports writers get over that the players were still great players prior to when they took steroids? Even weirder, David Ortiz is in the Hall of Fame, even though he failed an anonymous drug test in 2003. Ortiz is also on the same Fox Sports guest analyst panel as Rodriguez. Pete Rose, who was banned from the Hall of Fame due to betting on baseball, was also formerly a Fox Sports analyst. Is that weird or what? It seems like baseball likes Rodriguez and Rose enough to generate TV ratings, but not enough to immortalize them in Cooperstown. The commissioner's office is absolute power, by the way. Rob Manfred can reinstate Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson at any time. I bring this up because if the stats are tainted, why doesn't the commissioner's office mandate that all of Bonds, Rodriguez's, Sosa's, etc. stats come with an asterisk next to them at baseballreference.com? Yes, that would be a dictatorship, but that's basically what the commissioner does. He's a dictator who does what's in the best interest of both the owners and the game itself. The commissioner's office wants fans to purchase tickets and merchandise, but at the same time, the commissioner has the ultimate power to do what's in the best interest of the game. So if the players cheated, their stats shouldn't count, right? I don't think that putting an asterisk next to alleged steroid users is the right idea. After all, Frank Thomas alleged that Ivan Pudge Rodriguez and Jeff Bagwell did steroids. Not by direct name, of course, but this was reported in both the Associated Press and Dallas Morning News. It's hard to put an asterisk next to Bonds and Clement because it's quite possible that Bagwell, Pudge, and Mike Piazza did steroids. Even in his 2013 autobiography, Piazza admitted using androstenedione, a muscle-building compound long banned by the International Olympic Committee and added to baseball's banned substances list in 2004. Piazza, like Bagwell, Pudge, and Ortiz, is in Cooperstown. But did he take steroids all the time? An anonymous Major League Baseball veteran once told the press, quote, "On a scale of 1 to 10, to grade the odds that Piazza used performance-enhancing drugs, I'd have to say a 12, maybe a 13, close quote. It's looking likely that Piazza took steroids, but he's already in Cooperstown. You can't just remove anyone from the Hall of Fame, even if they have a criminal background. The same goes for other sports. Not even Orenthal James Simpson has been removed from Canton, the home of the Football Hall of Fame. Simpson went on trial for a double murder, and although he was acquitted of those charges, he was still found liable for the deaths of those 2 people via a civil trial. My point is, why is Piazza, Bagwell, Ortiz, and others allowed in the Hall of Fame, not A-Rod or Bonds? I don't like how the writers and board of directors can pick and choose who they like and dislike according to Hall of Fame membership. Remember, it's called the Baseball Hall of Fame, not the Hall of Morality. This is important to note because Kennesaw Mountain Landis, MLB's first ever commissioner, was also the same name as the MLB MVP trophy until 2020. Unfortunately, Landis never allowed baseball to reintegrate during his leadership. Ergo, he was kind of a racist since the commissioner has authoritarian powers to reintegrate baseball by himself. Yet the MVP trophy was named after him and he's in the Hall of Fame. But we can't elect Clemens into Cooperstown because he took a substance that didn't even require testing for until 2003. Before we end this video, I want to elaborate on why the voters don't like how Alex Rodriguez and Barry Bonds hit so many home runs late in their career, in their late 30s. According to Dan Zimborski, the creator of the ZiPS projection system, Bonds only should have finished with 551 career home runs instead of 762. This is a major gap, and it shows why the writers don't want to elect Bonds. It's not just that he committed obstruction of justice, and it's not just that he was accused of domestic violence by his ex-wife. It's also because he shattered Hank Aaron's lifetime home run record by cheating. In case you're wondering, ZiPS takes into account past performances of Bonds and Clemens and how they might do as they get older without the help of steroids. It compares athletes from other decades. If you're wondering, ZiPS is endorsed by MLB.com. Anyway, the famous projection system projects that Bonds would only hit 23 homers the year he broke the single-season record with 73. In terms of Clemens, he finished with 354 wins. If he hadn't taken steroids in 1998, Clemens would have projected to win 298 games. The whole article is very interesting. I highly suggest you read it, even if you're a casual baseball fan. The ZiPS projections tell us that the sports writers and board of directors from Cooperstown don't like how Clemens, Bonds, and Sheffield and the others have inflated numbers. Then again, we don't exactly know who did steroids, when they took them, and when they stopped taking them. In my opinion, if the statistics count and never have an asterisk placed next to them on a formal basis, the player's credentials should count as Hall of Fame worthiness. Steroids were outlawed in 1991, but MLB didn't bother to anonymously test ball players until 2003. Because of this, I don't think that MLB has the right to keep Palmeiro, Sheffield, and others out of the Hall of Fame. Performance-enhancing drugs seem to be highly frowned upon, but weren't exactly against the rules until 2003. As such, if the players were seemingly free to take the substances, why should they not be allowed into Cooperstown? Furthermore, Ortiz is in the Hall of Fame. This is a confirmed steroids user. The precedent has now been set that former steroid users can be in the Hall of Fame. If I had to pick, his fellow Fox Sports analyst and Alex Rodriguez will be the next confirmed steroids user elected into Cooperstown. But what do you think? Should the former PED users be enshrined into Cooperstown? If so, what former confirmed or alleged steroid user should be elected by the voters? Make sure to comment your thoughts below and subscribe to our channel.